Welcome to the Sports Note for Tuesday, March the 5th, and we're just going to get right into it. One of the greatest of all time, and probably he's certainly on my Mount Rushmore. Hung him up on Sunday night in the Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina at the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. And of course, it goes without saying, I'm talking about the legendary Steve Borden, who everyone knows as Sting. Sting wrapped up a 38-year career in the place where he wrestled Ric Flair to a 45-minute time limit draw for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship back in 1988. Some of the legendary battles against Flair. Of course, it was Flair and Sting, which was the final match of in the history of WCW on the final Nitro. Uh, the legendary alliance with those such as the Road Warriors, Nikita Koloff, the rivalry he had with Nikita Koloff back in the late 80s and early 90s. Um, the alliance with Lex Luger, being the flagship for WCW, including when they had gone under in 2001. And of course, everyone remembers the legendary rivalry with him and the New World Order, headed up by Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, which actually turned out to be the greatest thing that ever happened to Sting's career. Sting broke in back in the mid '80s with as Blade Runner Sting, and was teamed up with Jim Hellwig, who everyone now knows as the late great Ultimate Warrior. Um, After they had split and kind of gone singles, um, Hellwig, who later changed his name to Warrior, um, had a great run in the WWE, albeit very controversial at times. Had a cup of coffee in WCW, and then Sting proceeded to win championship upon championship upon championship, putting the company on his back. He held the World's Heavyweight Championship between any of the promotions that he wrestled for a combined 13 times, which I want to say is in the top five all time. We know that Ric Flair and John Cena are at 16. I want to say Randy Orton's at 14, and I want to say that Sting with the 13 is right behind in fourth. I'd have to go back and double check that. But he also held two United States championships and also five-time World Tag Team Champion in a career that spanned the National Wrestling Alliance, which then broke away and became World Championship Wrestling. Then after WCW went under, Sting kind of wrestled on a little bit of the independent circuit for a couple of years before ultimately joining the TNA Total Nonstop Action Wrestling Impact, which had then was part of the revived National Wrestling Alliance. So it kind of come full circle for a point. Then TNA breaks away from the National Wrestling Alliance, becomes TNA Wrestling on their own. Sting was not around when they had changed to Global Force Wrestling, and then changing to Impact, and now going back to TNA. So he was not around for that entire saga. And then after leaving there, eventually does finally get his shot in the in World Wrestling Entertainment, albeit a very very brief period that was kind of marred by injuries. And let's also be honest, it could have been a shot from former owner Vince McMahon to kind of bury WCW once and for all. Sting only had one WrestleMania match, which was against Triple H, so it was WCW versus WWE, and Triple H brings out DX and to interfere on his behalf, and Sting actually ends up having Hogan, Hall, and Nash, which it's not any stretch by saying that Sting and Hogan did not really see eye to eye all the time. Then again, not a whole lot of people saw eye to eye with Hogan for a lot of their career. But we all remember when the New World Order began to form, in the summer of 1995. I believe, or I yes, the actually I should say 1996. How can I forget that? Um, and then there was a lot of doubt as to where Sting's allegiance would lie, according to the character. He then had kind of grown his hair out a little bit from the trademark, flat top, blonde, white meat baby face to a lot darker of a character, which in turn was inspired by Scott Hall himself, the late legendary Scott Hall. That this was shortly after the 1994 cult classic The Crow had hit theaters, and they were kind of looking for a new direction for Sting, and Sting, being the franchise of WCW, was a legitimate challenger to try and topple the NWO's regime. So you saw Sting, turn his back on the cameras, saying, the only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure, and then left for several months. Worked in Japan for some of that time, but Sting would not wrestle um, from Fall Brawl 1996 all the way up until WCW Starrcade in December of 1997. And Sting would not speak to the camera. You might see him like going up to like the Steiner brothers or Diamond Dallas Page or Lex Luger or something and whispering something in their ear, but he did not speak on camera for the better part of 15 months and kept the character engaging. He would descend from the rafters, he would come up through the bottom of the ring. I think probably my favorite Sting moment from that entire period was the Army of Stings, where they would send, where uh, 15 or 20 Sting impersonators came out, and Sting took a right hand from Buff Bagwell and basically kind of no sold it, and then dropped Bagwell with a Scorpion Death Drop, and then that actually just really put everything in motion. Now, once he won the World Championship, which we all know was a kind of a botched finish, um, that WCW, that was the first nail in the coffin of the company as we knew it. And then Sting would eventually join the NWO Wolfpack um, after they had kind of splintered from from Hogan's NWO Black and White, so to speak. And then Sting was really not much of a part of when you had like the NWO Elite, where it was the red and black kind of merging back together and everything. Um, Turned heel for a short period, which really kind of did not last very long. Won another world title at that point, and then just kind of, I don't want to say floundered, because Sting never really floundered in his career at any point. Um, and then as after WCW closes, he shows up surprisingly enough in TNA Impact, wins the world championship there. I want to say 6 times between NWA and also after they had split off to TNA. Headed up the main event Mafia, which had Kevin Nash and Samoa Joe, with the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion Kurt Angle, Scott Steiner. So some of the creme de la creme um, of the wrestling world at that particular point. And then is also does kind of turn heel a little bit with Kevin Nash, but as it turns out, they were on the because they were the ones kind of actually saying, there's poison coming from within. Don't trust Hogan, who was running TNA on camera at that point. Um, and then and then was essentially kind of, justified um, at that particular point, and then helped to try and, bring down the Immortal faction, um, after they had kind of completely taken over. And then he leaves TNA and then has about an 18-month stint in the WWE, where he he's a thorn in the side of Triple H's authority regime, at the time, makes his debut at Survivor Series, which causes the Authority to get kayfabe fired. Um, gets injured, has a feud with Seth Rollins over the World Heavyweight Championship, where it was alleged that he was supposed to win the World Championship, and then uh, severely hurts his back taking a turnbuckle powerbomb from Rollins, and that effectively kind of ended Sting's in-ring career for a number of years. He gets inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame back in 2016, and then you don't really kind of hear much of Sting for the next several years until he shows up at AEW's Winter is Coming in December of 2020. And then starts his alliance with Darby Allin, who he kind of takes under his wing. Now, keep in mind at this point, Sting is in his 60s. I want to say he was 59 or 60 when he joins AEW. Darby Allin at that point was in his mid 20s, and every time Sting shows up, it's an electric experience. Even when he came out with Darby and didn't even get involved for an AEW show I saw in person in Cleveland, it was still cool because it was the first time I had actually seen Sting in 25 years from when I saw him in person at a Monday Nitro back in 1990 back in 1997 or 98, somewhere in there, after WCW had kind of changed the logo and everything. Um, and then goes 29 and 0, 28 and 0, I should say, finishes career 29 and 0, and announces late last year that he is going to finally step away, and makes the announcement that it was going to be March 3rd in Greensboro. Again, the site of the legendary match with Ric Flair for the NWA World Championship. And then they win the World Tag Team Championships a couple of weeks ago on an episode of Dynamite in the main event, AEW Dynamite. And you don't think that there's really going to be a singles match with Sting because him teaming with Darby Allin. Um, First of all, they've had some great on-screen matches, including Sting jumping off a ladder, basically off the top rope through a couple of stacked tables out by the announce desk, where Sting actually ended up getting hurt. I want to say he hurt his jaw or something. He kind of shorted the jump. It was still one of the most amazing moments I've ever seen, because I've seen guys go through tables and jump further, but for somebody of that age to do it, and just everyone being stunned that Sting is still willing to take that kind of risk at his age. A couple of times he jumped out of the balcony. At an AEW show, but this one was one of his most impressive matches yet, because it was a tornado tag, and naturally you don't have to tag guys, so it's basically just it's a street fight. And we saw the Stinger go through three tables, and then he and Darby start pulling panes of glass from underneath the ring. And I'm actually joking with my best friend as we're watching it, on pay per view, together at our individual places. Like, is Sting really going into? Is Sting really having a death match for his final match? Um, where we get this great video tribute at the before the match and with his entrance, and both of his sons come out dressed in Sting's actual gear from it at certain points of his career. His One of his sons was wearing the original tights and boots that Sting wore in that 1988 match with Flair in Greensboro, and his other son was wearing one of his red and black Wolfpack singlets with his face painted up and everything. Um, so Sting and Darby start pulling out glass, and then Sting actually shatters one of them with his trademark black baseball bat. Gets suplexed through a couple of tables, gets power bombed through a table, and then gets thrown through a pane of glass on an Irish whip in a corner, where just a couple of moments earlier Darby Allin had done a 20-foot swan dive off a ladder through a pane of glass that was stacked on about 6 or 7 chairs to where Darby immediately started bleeding everywhere. And even some of the fans in the front row got cut. And this was not safety glass. This was real, it certainly wasn't fiberglass or plexiglass, but this was an actual pane of glass. Um, so there might be a couple of, AEW might be paying out a couple of, quick trips to an urgent care or a medical clinic or something like that, for anyone who kind of suffered cuts or things of that nature. Um, but then, hits a couple of his signature Scorpion Death drops, finishes with his signature Scorpion Death lock, um, and then walks away. A champion has couple of minutes on screen before the cameras cut, and then AEW kept the cameras rolling, and he does about 7 or 8 more minutes off camera after after the pay per view had stopped broadcasting. That's actually available on the official AEW Twitter feed, Twitter threads, and their Instagram feed. Um, and have some time with his sons. Darby actually says, "I'm going to go to the hospital now." Joking, gets a real good laugh out of the fans. Walks away and kind of lets Sting have his moment. He brings out Tony Khan, who says a couple of words. And with that, according to the storyline now that the AEW Tag Team Championships are vacated, it's going to set up a tournament, which was the right thing to do. It's you don't want to have somebody as iconic and has meant as much to the wrestling business as Sting go out and, according to the storyline, have his last match end in a loss. Kurt Angle did it at WrestleMania. Um, you know, there was a lot of thought that was, Sting's last match going to be going on last? Could it be second to last? But for somebody with that kind of impact, you give them the after match curtain call where by the time it ended, and then there was the celebration, there was a good 20 minutes from the time the final bell rang after Nick Jackson tapped out the Scorpion Deathlock. Until Sting finally kind of left the ring and the ringside area, effectively ending the night's festivities. So let me know what you guys think. Did you watch the match? What did you guys think of the match? What did you guys think of Sunday night's pay-per-view on the whole? Uh, do you think Sting still stays on with AEW in some kind of capacity, even if it's not an on-screen character? Because he's already said he does not want to be a manager. Where do you put Sting in your top 10? Because he's got to be in your top 10 somewhere. If you're not putting Sting in the top 10, first off, you're a WWE mark who really can't have your opinion taken seriously. And number two, you're diminishing everything that the man meant to the business, both inside and outside the ring. I will be back with you guys here hopefully later on this week. Wise Guys Sports Show coming up Saturday night. We may actually be joined by one of our usual guests. Stay tuned to my Instagram and Mike's TikTok feed, and I will see you soon. Take care.